Every single year in America, people report experiences they say science can't fully explain. Sudden, dramatic personality changes that happen seemingly overnight. Unexplained voices that others can't hear. Violent physical reactions to religious symbols or prayers. Some observers call these clear mental health crises. Others attribute them to severe stress or unprocessed trauma. And some people, often quietly, sometimes reluctantly, call them demonic possession. So tonight, we're not here to prove or disprove anything supernatural. We're asking a careful, thoughtful question. Why are reports of demon possession still occurring across the United States in a modern scientific age? What does this enduring phenomenon reveal about our understanding of the human mind, spiritual reality, and the very fabric of our society? The whole idea of demonic possession feels ancient, like something from medieval Europe or biblical times. It conjures images of dark rituals and superstitious fears, seemingly out of place in our technologically advanced society. Yet, reports continue to surface regularly in hospitals, churches, and families all across America, challenging our neat categories. Christian ministers and priests still receive urgent requests for help from people who believe they or their loved ones are possessed. Psychologists and psychiatrists still encounter patients describing experiences they interpret as spiritual attacks, grappling with how to respond. And families remain caught somewhere in the middle, unsure whether to seek medical help, spiritual intervention, or both, often feeling isolated and misunderstood. So, what's actually happening in these situations? And why does this topic absolutely refuse to disappear, even as America becomes more secular and scientifically advanced, prompting us to look deeper? Belief in spiritual possession existed long before the United States was even founded. We're talking about thousands of years of human history across different cultures, from ancient Mesopotamia to indigenous traditions. The idea of external entities influencing human behavior is a recurring theme. In the Bible, multiple stories describe individuals who were afflicted by what are called unclean spirits or demons. Luke 9:42 describes Jesus encountering a boy in this condition, and Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy. These narratives were central to early Christian understanding of the spiritual world, shaping how suffering was perceived. Early Christianity understood illness, trauma, and spiritual struggle very differently than modern medicine does. There wasn't the same rigid separation between physical, mental, and spiritual categories of suffering. They were often seen as interconnected. So we have to ask a foundational question. Did ancient people simply misunderstand mental illness and neurological conditions, labeling them as demonic because they lacked scientific knowledge? Or were they actually describing real experiences that we still struggle to fully name and understand even today with all our medical advances? That question shapes how we approach modern reports of possession. Are they throwbacks to superstition, or are they pointing to something we're missing in our contemporary frameworks? In the United States today, reports of possible demonic possession often come from several specific contexts. These include deeply religious households where spiritual warfare is part of the worldview, trauma survivors dealing with severe psychological distress, individuals experiencing extreme stress from life circumstances, and sometimes people with absolutely no prior mental health history who suddenly develop dramatic symptoms. What's interesting is that many people report remarkably similar symptoms regardless of their background or religious tradition. Personality changes, speaking in different voices, knowledge they shouldn't have access to, physical strength beyond normal capacity, and aversion to sacred objects. These commonalities beg for explanation. But here's the thing. Medical professionals who evaluate these same individuals usually diagnose recognized psychiatric conditions like dissociative disorders, various forms of psychosis, or severe anxiety and trauma responses. The symptoms often match established diagnostic criteria, and treatment protocols exist for these conditions. So here's the fundamental question we're dealing with. Why do spiritual explanations for these experiences persist even alongside medical ones? Why doesn't scientific understanding simply replace religious interpretation, especially when effective treatments are available? Is it because people are clinging to outdated superstition, or is it because medical categories don't fully capture what people are actually experiencing, leaving a void that spiritual explanations fill. Some Christian denominations in the United States still practice exorcism, the formal religious ritual for casting out demons, though they typically do so extremely cautiously and rarely. The Catholic Church, for instance, maintains trained exorcists, requiring extensive theological and psychological preparation. Some Pentecostal and charismatic churches regularly practice what they call deliverance ministry, which can be more informal but aims for similar spiritual liberation. These practices highlight a continued belief in active spiritual forces. However, most responsible religious organizations require extensive safeguards before performing these rituals. This often includes comprehensive psychological evaluations by licensed professionals, medical clearance to rule out physical causes, and extreme oversight to prevent harm. They've learned from historical abuses and tragic outcomes, emphasizing discernment. 1 John 4:1 says, "Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits," which many churches interpret as a call for discernment and caution, rather than immediate spiritual warfare. This raises a really important question. Is the church responding to genuine spiritual danger when it performs exorcisms? Or is it responding to very real human suffering but interpreting and addressing it through spiritual language and ritual? Can both things be true simultaneously? And how do we navigate such complex realities? The answer to that question depends entirely on your worldview about spiritual reality and the nature of human suffering. Psychologists and psychiatrists who study this phenomenon note something fascinating. The human mind is profoundly influenced by the belief systems and cultural contexts people grow up in. Culture fundamentally shapes how symptoms get expressed, what behaviors appear when someone is in distress, and how they are perceived by others. Faith traditions, in turn, shape how those symptoms get interpreted, what meaning gets assigned to unusual experiences, and what actions are deemed appropriate responses. In highly religious cultures, psychological distress often manifests with spiritual content and gets interpreted as demon possession, offering a familiar framework for understanding. In more secular cultures, the exact same underlying conditions might present with different symptoms and get interpreted as purely clinical psychiatric disorders, leading to different treatment paths. So we're forced to ask, are people across different contexts actually experiencing the same fundamental suffering, the same psychological pain, the same neurological disturbances, but simply naming it differently based on their cultural frameworks? Is a person experiencing dissociative identity disorder fundamentally different from someone their church believes is possessed? Or are these just different cultural interpretations of similar human experiences, each valid within its own context? This isn't just an academic question. The answer determines what kind of help people receive and whether it actually helps them find healing and peace. We also need to consider why possession reports seem to be continuing or even increasing in America right now. The United States is currently experiencing some significant social and psychological pressures, rapidly rising rates of anxiety and depression across all age groups, constant digital overload that never gives our minds rest, increasing social isolation despite being more connected than ever, and widespread spiritual searching as traditional religious frameworks lose their hold on younger generations. These are all documented trends affecting millions of Americans, creating a fertile ground for various forms of distress. Throughout human history, when societies experience instability and widespread fear, explanations for suffering often become more symbolic and spiritual rather than purely rational. Plagues got interpreted as divine punishment. Mental illness got seen as demonic. Natural disasters were signs of cosmic warfare. So another critical question emerges. Do possession reports reflect an actual spiritual crisis happening in America? A genuine increase in demonic activity, if you believe in that? Or do they reflect a cultural and psychological crisis that's being expressed through available spiritual language? A way to make sense of overwhelming internal and external pressures? Because the suffering is real either way, even if we disagree about its ultimate source, and understanding its roots is paramount. Christian scripture itself repeatedly warns against letting fear dominate how believers approach spiritual questions. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "God has not given us a spirit of fear," suggesting that healthy faith shouldn't be characterized by constant terror of demonic attack. Most mainstream churches in America today emphasize careful pastoral care over dramatic confrontation with supposed demons. They encourage therapy, medication when appropriate, and spiritual support that doesn't assume every problem is demonic, promoting a balanced approach. Mental health professionals, for their part, emphasize proper treatment and compassionate care rather than judgment about religious beliefs, seeking to alleviate suffering regardless of its perceived origin. So, where should Americans actually turn when they have experiences that feel completely unexplainable, that defy easy categorization? Should they go to science and medical professionals who can diagnose and treat recognized conditions, offering evidence-based interventions? Should they turn to faith communities who can provide spiritual framework and ritual, offering comfort and meaning within a sacred context? Or should they somehow access both simultaneously, seeking an integrated approach that respects both dimensions of human experience? And is there a way to integrate medical and spiritual approaches without compromising either one, creating a holistic path to healing? These questions matter urgently for real families dealing with frightening situations right now, seeking answers and relief. Let me leave you with some deep questions to wrestle with. Are demon possession reports actually evidence of ongoing spiritual warfare between good and evil forces, a battle playing out in human lives? Or are they primarily evidence of humanity's ongoing struggle with different forms of suffering that we don't fully understand, a testament to the limits of our current knowledge? Why do these stories remain so culturally powerful even in what we call a rational scientific age, continuing to capture our imagination and provoke debate? What fundamental human need do they fulfill, and what anxieties do they tap into? And when someone genuinely believes they're under spiritual attack, whether that belief is objectively true or not, what response actually heals them and helps them move forward? Dismissing their experience? Confirming their worst fears? Or something far more nuanced, compassionate, and open to multiple truths? Whether you view these reports through the lens of faith or through the lens of psychology, they remind us of one crucial thing: people are genuinely hurting. People are desperately searching for explanations and solutions to experiences that defy easy answers. And not everything in human experience fits neatly into the categories we've created, whether those are religious categories or scientific ones. We don't end this story with confident answers or final conclusions. We end it with responsibility, with care, and with empathy for people caught in situations that terrify them. This is the Scholar's Ledger, where history, faith, and power are revealed. We invite you to join this vital discussion. Share your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe for more explorations into the unexplained, and help us continue this collective search for truth and understanding.